We all know that coaching can make a significant difference to what you do, but what difference does it make to the person you're becoming? I'm rereading a book by ethicist J. Philip Wogerman, in which he writes about the idea of virtue, and virtue has been described as a disposition of the will towards a good end. Or as Wogerman puts it even more succinctly, virtue is a habit. And he doesn't stop there. A virtuous life, he writes, must be cultivated like a garden. It isn't automatic. Morals define our character, and character is the essential starting point for moral decision making. So you can think of virtue like this, a foundation for good moral choices on which we build a garden in which we cultivate our moral habits. And in this context, the notion of habits is crucial. Every time we make a decision about anything, we're doing something that shapes our character, that reinforces or diminishes attitudes, assumptions, priorities, and patterns of behaviour that eventually will have some kind of impact on the quality, not only of our own lives, but on the lives of those around us. As part of our training, supervision and ongoing professional development, coaches will sometimes consider how they could resolve or respond to common ethical dilemmas. But what happens when we consider that all of our interactions as a coach have an ethical dimension, in that they affect the habits that our clients are developing? And what's true for the coach is true for managers and others in formal or informal leadership roles. Your decisions, your focus, how you influence others to think, and what you influence them to do has an ethical dimension. It affects who someone else is becoming. So, practically thinking, what could I do with this idea of cultivating virtue? Is there some kind of broad frame of reference I could apply to help work out what kind of moral influence I might be having on a fellow member of the human race? Happily, yes, there is. Whilst many cultures and philosophies have lists of virtues, one that I've found to be manageable and surprisingly relevant are the 4 classic Greco-Roman cardinal virtues. Prudence, discerning the appropriate course of action in any given situation. Fortitude, forbearance, strength, endurance, and the ability to confront fear and anxiety. Temperance, self-control, discretion and moderation. And justice, or fairness. In my own Christian faith tradition, we make these up to 7 with the addition of 3 more: faith, hope, and love. But for today, we'll just have a look at the first of these, prudence. Prudence has been described as the ability to discern the appropriate course of action to be taken in a given situation at the appropriate time. Prudence is about decision making, about charting courses. A key part of coaching is giving people the tools to make practical choices, to consider the consequences that could follow, and then to discern the wisest or most prudent path to follow. To help people understand what influence underlie their decision making, I often take them through these 5 questions. Try them for yourself. For each of these statements, simply ask yourself, is this more like me or less like me? Before I make a decision, I like to gather as much data as possible and weigh up the pros and cons. Relevant information is the key to making a good decision. Is that more like you or less like you? Or how about this one? Before I make a decision, I like to try out some alternatives to see how I might get on with them. There's no substitute for a little hands-on experience. Is that more like you or less? Or what about this? When I make a decision, I'm influenced a lot by what other people think. Family, friends, colleagues, people I follow on social media. I place a high premium on the opinion of other people. In many ideas, there is much wisdom. Or what about this one? My intuition has served me really well in the past. In the end, I trust my gut to make a good decision. If it feels right, it probably is right. Or this one as a finale. I try to avoid making decisions for as long as possible. I find that if I do this, someone else will make the decision for me, or the issue will just go away. Que sera, sera. Is that more like you or less like you. If one or more of these approaches is regular or normal, then you've identified an habitual way of making decisions. From there, we can find an even deeper question to explore: the extent to which there is, underlying your preferred way of decision making, is a moral habit, an ethical imperative, or a virtue. Where, for example, in your decision making process might you find prudence, the ability to discern the appropriate course of action to be taken in any given situation at the appropriate time? Let me share an example to illustrate this. Some years ago, I spent a weekend working with some East Asian graduates who were about to leave the UK at the end of their course. Part of the weekend involved helping them explore options for the future, which included a one-to-one coaching conversation. In one of these, the graduate was considering how to navigate the different priorities of her own career ambitions, the possibility of marriage, and her responsibilities to her parents who had funded the course. The student came from a culture in which family, as opposed to the state, had primary responsibility for parental support in later life. I needed to understand the parameters in which I was coaching, so asked her which would take priority: personal career ambition or parental support. Without so much as a hesitation, she answered parental support. This was her starting point, as she sought to discover prudence, to discern the appropriate course of action to be taken in a given situation at the appropriate time. We explored what parental support needed to involve, its emotional as well as financial dimensions, and also what would happen if we explored how the graduate could achieve her own career ambitions over a longer time frame. In this way, we were able to come up with a wider range of choices and possibilities than she at first realised were available to her. She could, in short, find ways of discerning the habits that would enable her to be who she wanted to become in relation to her career, in relation to her parents, and in relation to her family culture. The decisions she would be making in relation to each of these were both practical and ethical. And it doesn't take a great deal of imagination to see that, to follow through on her decisions consistently, my graduates would need also to cultivate fortitude, temperance, and justice. From her own Christian faith, she could add the consistency that comes from faith, the patience inspired by hope, all wrapped up in the self-sacrificial motivation of love. For your own reflective exercise this month, why not review the 7 virtues and ask which of them you would like to see more evidence of in your own life. Use prudence as your starting point and consider what habits flow from your own preferred decision-making style and how you can use this to cultivate, like produce in your garden, the virtuous habits that form the foundation of the moral life that you want to lead. In short, that contribute to the person that you desire to become.